The next book, I'm gonna be killed for this. The next book is as the days pass and time goes on, seasons change, we are leaving August, and finally we enter September, which is the beginning of fall. And you may come to realize that throughout the entire last 3 months of the summer, I may not have actually uploaded any wrap-ups. I decided to kind of split up what I've been reading in the summer because honestly, I read a lot every month and I'm sick and tired of doing hour-long wrap-ups that I never ever edit and they don't see the light of day, and I'm tired. So today I'll be telling you all about the books that I thought were aggressively mediocre during the last 3 months of summer. Because some of them I'm just not smart enough to understand what happened, and other ones they simply were not for me. But let's just talk about it. So first off, I'm going to start off with a little book that I read because I think I was just trying to complete a certain number of books in a month or something like that, and I picked up a picture book called The Stuff of Stars, except no, I didn't. I listened to the audiobook of this picture book, which was exactly 5 minutes long. It was about the universe and how you're a bit in the universe, and I think it got kind of weirdly religious for a second. Downloaded it, listened to it, and then immediately deleted it and rated it 2 stars on Goodreads. So the next book was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, and I guess a lot of people like this book, but I don't. I did not connect with either of the characters. I honestly don't even remember their names. They Both Die at the End follows these 2 boys who realize they are going to die. They have this thing called Deathcast, and Deathcast is this service, sort of, that will determine when you're gonna die, and they will call you around 24 hours before you're gonna die and say, hey, you're gonna die, so that way you know, and you can live your last day to the fullest. Deathcast calls up these 2 boys, and they're both going to die on the same day, but they don't know how, and they don't know exactly when. So there is this way for you to meet friends. I believe it's called Last Friend, and it allows people who are about to die to have somebody in their life to hang out with before they go. Usually it's between somebody who is just about to die, who got the call, and somebody else who is not in that situation. But instead these 2 boys end up meeting each other through the app and deciding, let's spend our last day together. I found it really frustrating that there was one of the characters whose best friend was always there for him and really cared for him, and he was a huge part of her and her son's life. And he just refused to tell her that he was going to die. And like he spent like half the book just lamenting over the fact that he wasn't going to tell her. And I was like, okay, so what's next? And then the other one was like, I have this gang which is going to be left behind without me, but it's fine. And he was much more chill about it. But I just did not connect with either of their struggles, and obviously people are going to do things that are not necessarily really rational, especially if you're in this literal life and death kind of situation. But I just found it really strange that for people who were about to die to not want to actually connect with any of the people that they had met in life, and also didn't really do anything that interesting when they were hanging out together. So the book is called They Both Die at the End because both of the characters die at the end. But honestly, did they? Because I'm not sure. One of the characters died in a really stupid way where I was like, why did you even do that? Like, you know you're gonna die, so like, I guess you can't argue with what Deathcast says, but at the same time, it just kind of felt like this guy like walked straight into it, and like, that was foolish. And then the other one was like, and then the book just ended, so I was like, did he die? Did he die of a broken heart? I am disappointed because I really wanted to love a book, but it just was not happening for me. And I also was really annoyed because the style of writing often started chapters off with saying Deathcast did not call this person today because they weren't going to die this day. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then every single chapter was like, Deathcast didn't call this person because they're not going to die today. And I was like, yeah, I know. Can we just tell the story? And they were like, I'm so cute. Like, Deathcast didn't call you because you're not going to die. Deathcast apparently called the plot because the plot wasn't okay. Anyway, the next book was also a disappointment, and that was Carrds War. A lot of people seem to love Carrds War, and I think the concept by itself is really cool, but the execution wasn't good enough for me. We start out with the idea that there is this society of humans and automata, and humans created automata, but eventually automata rose up and realized that they were being treated as kind of servants for humans, and they wanted to rise up because they were more powerful and they were better, and then they sort of created this establishment of royalty and a whole kingdom, and very few humans are really left. So many years after all this has happened, one of the main characters is a royal automata, and the other character is this woman whose family was killed by automata, and she wants to get revenge on that princess. So it's a romance, and they're gonna fall in love with each other, but I didn't love how it happened. I really liked how this was going, that our main princess protagonist had these feelings that maybe something's not quite right, and she has this kind of identity crisis because of the way that she was built. She starts questioning everything, and then there's the other person who is like, she's really strong, and she's really brave, and she's really, like, she wants that revenge. So the human got hired, sort of, all of a sudden, to work with the royal family to help the princess. But she wants to kill the princess. But for me, I would think that there would be, like, a relative amount of banter and some more of like seeing the other person more clearly. And there was this scene where they're like sitting in a pool of water and they're like, oh my god, she's so beautiful. Do I want to stab her or be with her? What is the truth? There was some of that, but I thought there was going to be more romance and it was going to be beautiful, but I feel like they were just kind of like at odds and really awkward with each other until it was like, you know? So I didn't love that much, and I think the relationship could have been worked out better. I didn't really care about any of the other characters either. I think the middle part of this book just sort of dragged forever, and then there was this that was happening, and it was just like, why wasn't this in the middle of the book so that we could get to the action? And like all of that stuff that was dragging was just like kind of nothing. I don't really understand why it was there. And then I was just annoyed because the ending of the book, the main character, Crier, the princess, is like, there's gonna be a war. Carrds War. And I was like, the war isn't even in Carrds War? The book named Carrds War isn't even about Carrds War? Why did I read this then? It was a miss for me. But I know a lot of people really love this book, and it is Own Voices, so I would still recommend that you check it out if that's something that you're interested in, and maybe it'll appeal more to you, especially if you're looking for a book that has the word war in the title that's entertainment. The next book is The Guest List, and I read this with Darian from Darian Reads, and I don't think this book was bad, but for me, because I've read quite a few murder mysteries, I sort of very quickly realized there was something up with the way that this story was being told, and it allowed me to guess something like at the beginning of the book, and I had to wait hours in the audiobook until they revealed what happened, and I was like, I gave this book 2.5 stars. And the reason is, a 2 star is okay, a 3 star is good, and this is somewhere directly in the middle because I also don't like certain things because I read a lot of murder mysteries that are tailored to my taste. What I'm trying to say is I really enjoy detective style mysteries or really unusual style mysteries, but still generally following the whole scene of there's a murder, we don't know everything, but we're gonna figure it out, and like some person is on the scene to figure out what's gonna happen, and at the end there's like a big room full of people and the detective is just gonna like explain and then mic drop it and be like, it was you. That's what I love. This book didn't do that. Instead, you don't even know who fucking died until the end. What? These two people they're kind of annoying. And they decide to just randomly get married on this Irish island, and they invite all of these other people from their past, and of course there's like some tension and discourse between all the different people. And then we get kind of like a jump to the future, and they go like, can you believe this person is missing? And they won't say who it is. And then you jump back to the present and you're like, wow, I hate my husband. Wow, I hate my wife. I wish he was dead. And you're like, who's gonna die? And then they're like, I can't believe this person's missing. Maybe they're dead. And then you still, like, it's back and forth, but they never say who died. So I wasn't really invested enough to feel like I wanted to know why this person died and why they would have so many enemies towards the end of the book. And then I realized that, like, a lot of people didn't like this one particular character and then they died, and I was like, interesting. So I kind of wish that had been done earlier, just because it really appeals to me when you already have the case laid out and then you're just investigating. But instead, the way that this was, I think if you had revealed right away who died, it would be really easy to kind of guess who killed them. So it wouldn't have been as interesting of a mystery, and I think that's why it was written this way, which I can accept. And it is unusual. But for me, I just really don't enjoy not knowing who's dead. I don't like that very much. I didn't realize this at the time, but Darian pointed this out, and I think this is a great point. But if you're looking for a murder mystery in which you don't know who died and you're okay with that, maybe the reason that that works for you is because you're willing to like look at that. There's all these different tensions between different people, and it makes it more interesting that who would be driven to murder somebody for this reason, or who is really upset with that person, and maybe there was an accident, or maybe they had this revenge plot planned out for years, or maybe it was just a heat of the moment, passionate murder. So you don't really know who killed who because there are all of these different people who hate each other throughout the book. It does create an interesting feeling. For me, the feeling was frustration. For you, maybe it won't be. So I won't say it was a bad book. I won't say that you should not read it. I will say, for me, it was just, okay. The next book, I'm gonna be killed for this. The next book is Sea of Monsters, the second Percy Jackson book. And I did not like this book. And I'm willing to say it, it was really just okay, and maybe less. I didn't like it. If you've seen some of my past videos, you may know that I loved the first Percy Jackson book. I thought that The Lightning Thief was so freaking good, and everything about it just totally did it for me. Like, wow, okay, you have a great cast of characters, you have this really cool world building that you've created with all these different intricate magical rules that work together, and there's no like little cracks or plot holes or anything, but it actually fits. It's great. It's still whimsical. It's still funny. There are all these adventures that they go on, and it's really fun to just follow along, and you never really feel like any of it's dragging or it's doing something ridiculous. And when it's doing something ridiculous, it's a fun kind of ridiculous that isn't like stupid. So I thought that was awesome, and I couldn't wait to see how this would continue in Sea of Monsters. And then everything changed. I did not like the fact that all these relationships that were built up between the different characters, mainly Percy, Annabeth, and Grover, just sort of dissolved. So a year goes by, Percy is back at camp, and suddenly he and Annabeth are like barely friends or something. They don't seem to be on the same terms. She seems to be angry at him all the time, or just like extra sassy, even though they got along great in the first book. Grover's like not there for like half of the book for a specific reason, because Percy keeps seeing him in visions, and everyone's like, Percy, maybe you should lay off the alcohol at night. Why didn't they believe him? Like, okay, you have this world of mystical gods, and someone's like, I'm having visions, and they're like, impossible? Nobody could ever do, what? No? Why? Why is that impossible? What? Not a fan. Also not a fan of the way that Titus was written. So Titus appears, he is this dude that is in Percy's human class, who ends up going to camp and is being discovered as one of the, he is a son of one of the gods. And he is a Cyclops. So I think if you're a Cyclops, it means that a god had you with something else, like a sea nymph or something, like not a human. He's like a demigod, but he's like a demigod demi-fish. Titus is a Cyclops, and everybody treats him like shit. They're so mean to him, and I also didn't enjoy the fact that when I read this as an audiobook, the person who was narrating made Titus sound really stupid. And I was like, he's just a kid, like, leave him alone. And I know kids are mean, but I just feel like every single person in the narrative, including in Percy's head, everyone was just super mean to Titus, and Titus was like a baby giant, right? Like basically just like a 4-year-old giant in the body of like a 11-year-old like everybody else or whatever. They were so mean. They were like, you're so stupid, you can't do anything. I was like, he's 4. He's like a cat in a human body. What are you doing? Leave him alone. And then also like near the end, Percy finally is nice to him and everyone's like, Percy, you're amazing. And I was like, you guys suck. So I didn't like that. And I also just thought that the way that the story went just sort of was like the exact opposite of what happened in The Lightning Thief. The Lightning Thief was like awesome, amazing, perfect, wonderful.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before, unafraid to reference or not reference.
And then Sea of Monsters was just really bad. I still plan to continue with the series because I think Sea of Monsters may have been touted as like the least strong. I've seen some people who love it and some people who really are like, it's okay. I still want to continue it, but it's just not an immediate priority for me right now. So the next book is The Dilemma. This is a book by B.A. Paris, who is one of my favorite authors. Why did I not like this book very much? Because it wasn't a domestic thriller and I didn't know. If you actually read the description of this book, it seems like this could be a domestic thriller. It's not. Instead, what we got was this story about a family that is like mad at each other all the time for like 7 hours. So I read this as an audiobook, and this splits perspectives between a man and a woman who are married, and they both have a secret about their daughter. I won't spoil what those secrets are, but I will say that while both are definitely like really big things, one of those secrets was way worse than the other one, and they both had like this whole thing for like 5 like real life hours of listening to this audiobook of just back and forth of like, should I tell him? Should I tell her? I can't tell because then it'll ruin everything. Well, if I tell, then it'll be bad. So let me just let them have another 4 hours of happiness. Let me let them have more happiness, and I won't tell. And then at the end they tell, and they're like, how could you not tell me? How could you never tell me? I don't believe you. We're getting divorced. Like, wah. I just wish I knew what this was going in, because it was not advertised as a family drama. To me, it definitely read as a domestic thriller, and usually it's between a woman and her husband, and the husband is shitty and the woman is about to die and she has to escape and like overthrow her patriarchal husband. And in this one, it wasn't that, which is, I guess, good if you think about it. But what happened was very tragic, and the way that they dealt with it was good. It was good writing, and it wasn't bad, except for that middle part, and it just ruined the book for me. If you got this book as an audiobook and you listened to the first 2 hours and then you skipped until the last 2 hours, that's the whole book that you need. You literally don't, just Richard Nixon with me for a second, okay? You can read the first 2 hours and the last 2 hours, and you don't need any of this shit in the middle because it doesn't do anything. The last book I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to barely talk about this, is Turbulence by David Soleil. And the reason I'm barely going to talk about it is because I don't even know what the fuck happened in this book. I have no idea what this book was about. I read this very quickly. I would really like to read books whose covers match in order. Does that make sense? Where like you have like this really pretty book that has a red cover, and then the next book has like a red-ish thing on the side, and then it fades into blue, and you're like, if I read these next to each other, it's like it blends and it looks all good. And like that's kind of what I wanted to do. I just kind of read this book because it's only an hour or 2 hours of an audiobook, and I understood part of it, and then I didn't understand anything, and maybe I wasn't paying attention, but I'm not really interested to go back and revisit it because I know how many brain cells I have, and it's not enough. There are these 15 people, something happens to one person and it affects another person, and that person goes somewhere and then something happens and it affects the next person. So it's kind of like blockchain for different people on how they each kind of affect each other's lives. It's sort of that whole, like, you know, if like the puddle and the rings kind of thing. So if you are interested in like really intense books that I don't understand and you want to feel more superior than me, then go ahead and check this book out, but I have nothing else to say about it because I literally don't know what's going on. That is the end of my aggressively mediocre summer reads. I have way more reads that were way better. If you've watched this far, because everyone's doing this now, if you've watched this far, leave an emoji that best describes the last thing you ate. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Rachel. This is Let Me in the Library, and I'll see you next time. Oh, subscribe!